Hello, Inside Great Minds listeners. I am excited to introduce to you today our guest, Dr. Terri-Ann Samuels. Dr. Terri-Ann Samuels is a good friend of mine, and I was excited to have her on our podcast for many reasons. One, she's an innovator in medicine as a practitioner and a urogynecologist. She studied in London as an gynecologist and OB. She got to experience the medical practice in Europe through that lens. She came to the States. She's had worked for another practice. She started her own practice. She has a testosterone clinic. She works with both men and women on hormones, but also practices as a private care urogynecologist. And she just has a great perspective on medicine and her story of how growing up in Jamaica, what that was like inside of a very academic family, and then her transition to her professional focus in medicine is an exciting journey. And we get to hear a little bit of the innovations that are occurring in medicine today. So I think you'll really enjoy this episode from a different perspective, a different take from a business owner and also from a medical practitioner. And so without further ado, I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Terri-Ann Samuels. You came stateside from Jamaica, and that's
Mhm,
where you were raised and grew up until
mhm.
how old were you, Dr. Samuels, when you first moved to?
Oh, it's interesting. I moved and then moved back. So
Okay.
I actually went to boarding school in Toronto, and then moved back to Jamaica after I finished med school to work for a bit, and then I moved stateside. So I've kind of moved around quite a bit in terms of my own development. But yeah, Jamaica is really culturally where um, where my family's from, where I blossomed, where I matured. So it probably out of all the countries I've lived in, probably carries the most culturally weight in terms of my development.
Where did you get your sense of humor? Was that Canadian or was that
A, um, um, no, I mean, again, that's my prescription now and forever. Laughter is the best medicine. I don't care what aspect you practice, and having a sense of humor is the only way you get through this thing called life. So, I want to say it was inherited, um, but there's nothing I love to do more than laugh. So,
the first time we sat down, I thought, oh, Dr. Samuels could be serious and get down to the brass tacks and have no time. And I literally confused you for stand-up comedian. I mean, is this something that runs through your whole family?
yeah.
Or is this just you that's the comedian in the family?
I mean, I think I'm probably the lightest, but I think I think, and also, I've been talking about this a lot in terms of different types of socialization, but I think there is some social clout for good storytelling, right? So
Hmm.
you look forward to getting together with other people because you want to tell the story that makes everybody laugh. That's the life of the party. And so you just get in the habit of gathering those anecdotes as you go through life, and you present them and no holds barred, right? So being around people you're comfortable enough to do that with, and keeping life really simple, and making sure you laugh as much as possible.
Wow, I think that is a great prescription for many many people.
Yes.
One that I fully believe in. What is so a lot of people I run into, doctor is something that they've made a mental decision in when they were quite young. Like it's kind of when you're starting to do the doctor role play as a little kid,
Mm-hmm.
and then it just
Mm-hmm.
that's what they wanted to do for life.
Mm-hmm.
What was the journey in uncovering that um, uh, education in medicine, and then your specific focus came about? How did that happen?
How much time do we have? um, oh, ooh. The thing is, I think I had desires to practice medicine when I was younger, and then they got reinforced. I think by parenting, if that's what you want to do, then we'll support you. Um, so I think that it's just the need to help as cliche as it sounds, but again, the need to leave things better than you found them, um, combined with, strong academic background. And I think it just was the obvious choice. My pediatrician was probably the biggest influence. And I mean, in Toronto, it's not, it's the national service. Um, so, but I had this pediatrician who had her office out of her garage, right? And so I never went into this growing up. I never went when I was little. I didn't go
Yeah.
into this office with tons of people in there. It was this very individualized service where you felt you were the only people there. And I remember feeling, you know, the schedule was always open, and we were able to go almost any time if any of the kids were sick. And I remember that feeling, and I remember wanting to be just like Dr. Kent. She was light and she was bubbly, and she was an older lady. And I thought, this is what I want to do. And then fast forward, you get through academics. The support came from parents who kind of said, well, if this is what you want to do, this is what you got to start doing now, right? Like
Mm.
you can't get up 10 years from now and decide you want to do medicine. The habits have to start now. um, and getting into good study habits, etc., and watching them manifest throughout my academic career. And then getting into went to boarding school. I know, right? I didn't go to boarding school because they thought I was
They sent you
the
away. I
caveat.
understand.
Yeah. Um, so I ended up going to boarding school, and the lesson from that was, to really be focused on what you want to do. Because I got to boarding school. Now, boarding school was the end of high school, so I did a
Mm.
couple of extra years of high school because I graduated from high school a little bit early. I was 16 when I graduated, and my parents were like, "You're not going to college," so they sent me to boarding school for 2 years. And I got there, and my seniors, my advisors, especially Mrs. Robson, old English woman, um, she said to me, what do you want to do? I'd gotten a scholarship to Queen's University. I'd, had all this stuff, no tuition. And then she's like, well, what do you want to study? Because, you have to get this first degree. And I was like, I don't want to study anything else. Like, I don't want to do biochemistry. I don't want to do physics, kinesiology, not interested. I was like, I don't know what to do, but I do not want to do any of that. And she just came to me and she said, just go and do medicine. And I was like, I don't understand what you're talking about. She's like, then apply in England, because you don't have to do a first degree. Your first degree is a
Wow.
bachelor's in medicine and surgery. And I'm in Toronto. I hadn't been to, I'd gone to England as a 2-year-old. And I was like, but this woman believed in me enough to, like, you can do this. Like, just put the application, see what happens. Threw the
Yeah.
application out there, got called for an interview, and there I was, starting med school, and I'm on my 18th birthday.
Wow.
So, and again, that's where the journey began. Had a fantastic time there, training, and then came out. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
this is great. Well, and I'm thinking that you're probably going to share this component of it. Your family are kind of medical practitioners largely, right? I mean, it wasn't just you that decided to pursue that track, but
That's
um,
not true. I'm the first physician.
you were the first physician, and then
Yeah.
everybody followed in your
Well,
footsteps.
my siblings are both dentists, so we can start that argument if you want.
Oh, I
Ooh,
see. I
dentist
see.
versus doctor.
Well, so this is actually what maybe brings me to my question. So
Right.
my apology
No.
for conflating the dentist with doc. But your pursuit is very unique in your family. Like
Hmm.
what was it that when did you have that moment of wanting to pursue your particular focus,
You mean in terms of medicine or in terms of my subspecialty?
your subspecialty?
I don't know. So I felt like, I think one of the things that I personally value is the responsibility of people's stories, right?
Mhm.
And in high school, I kind of considered myself a little bit of a kind of like an ombudsman. Like everybody, people would tell me things and people would confide in me. So I had relationships, all grades, across my grade. And I just had these, and to this day, these relationships have survived. But I remember feeling that sense of responsibility, and that manifested when I got into med school. I was lauded for um, being able to get the most information out of a patient.
Mm.
In terms of, when you're taking a history and you have to report back and trying to make a diagnosis and get information. And those are things that I had been lauded for. And so, combine that with wanting to do surgery. And so I ended up in this OBGYN realm, right? Because a lot
Yeah.
of it is about patient stories and the responsibility that comes with it. You're such an integral part of their lives, for the best day of their life, right? Which can be glorious on one end or disastrous.
Yeah.
And you can be a part of that change. And I thought, this is me. This is what I want to do. And then, I was in England, and of course, you're in England and you're like, oh my God, this is so exciting. I'm going to deliver babies. So of course, everybody loves the baby part, right?
Yeah.
But in England, the catch is this. So you, as a consultant, right, where you're following the medical side, England has a lot of midwives. So really, the day-to-day deliveries are done by midwives. You
Huh.
swoop in like Superman, right? If something's going wrong and you do the C-section or you get the difficult delivery done, right? So it's kind of like
Yeah.
this, this hero mode, And then I came to the United States, and I remember starting my internship. I mean, I didn't do any research in terms of, in those days, we didn't have all this internet stuff going on. So I mean, I didn't do, and of course, this was 2 years ago, but I didn't do all this research. And so I remember starting, and my senior said to me, okay, go in and push with that patient. And I was like, what are you talking about? I said, no, hold on a second. Wait, whoa, I'm a physician. I don't push with patients. And I'm in there, and this woman is like, push, push. And then she put her foot up on my hip, and I was like, what is going on? This is crazy. So it was the realization that OBGYNs in America actually
You-
like deliver all babies, normal,
Wow.
abnormal. And so I remember I was like a second year resident, and I remember one of my mentors who was doing pelvic surgery. I was up at like 2 o'clock in the morning pushing with this patient. And I remember like tears streaming down my face. And I remember him going, do you really want to do this for the rest of your life? It's like, no. Like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, I can't see straight. I'm exhausted. And
Yeah.
I mean, by the grace of God, he changed my life. He somehow got the administration to let me go to Kenya with him to do a medical mission to repair fistula.
Wow.
And so I ended up in the middle of my residency, which is unheard of. I got a week to go and operate on the Pakat tribe in Kenya. Right. So now here's someone who thinks I have good surgical hands, and now I'm going to Africa to do this medical mission, and my life completely changed. And that's how I started getting into urogynecology. The fellowship had just started. We did the application. So a year after that, I applied and got into Mount Sinai, and that's where I started my fellowship in Urogyne. So that's kind of
Wow.
how I got into this super subspecialized. And Urogyne, just for so people understand, urogynecology is a cross between urology and gynecology. Um,
Mm.
but permission to speak openly. The focus tends to be on women. There are three holes. Ladies, if you don't know that, there are three holes. Gents, if you don't know, there are three holes. Front, middle, back. And so we quarterback all three holes.
Yeah. Got it.
Yes. And so going forward, again, then the specialty, and then in terms of getting out and seeing things, then we've kind of evolved a little bit. So mostly I came from an barn door, academic interventionalist surgical approach, you know, into private practice where you're talking a little bit more about holistic approach to the patient. So then the patients that were happiest in my practice, and I was selfishly getting the best surgical results, were the patients with the best tissue. The patients with the best
Mm.
tissue were the patients who had their hormones addressed. And so, and not only that, these patients were happier. I was like, why are you so happy? And so that's where the interest started to get into menopausal medicine and hormones. The menopausal medicine patients, the females, were coming and going, yeah, I feel better, life is better. Oh, my husband is interested. And so then I started getting into the male testosterone because it was the partners of my patients. So that's how this whole thing has kind of
Wow.
evolved.
And I want to definitely hear more about these practices and what you've come to understand, are the ramifications of taking care of that part of
Mm-hmm.
your life.
Mm-hmm.
Before we go into that, I mean, I just would love to hear this. Like mentors seem to have played some pretty major roles. I mean, you mentioned two of them already in your story, and maybe you wouldn't call them mentors as much as like momentary decisions they helped you make. But I would love to know more. Like, who would you say you viewed as mentors in your journey, and how did some of those people help you in processing some of the decisions and directions that you've made? And maybe you say there were no mentors. There were some facilitated decisions that were helpful from people who cared. Uh,
Right.
how would you describe those people in your life and what they did?
Um, I think the respect for people's story and for people being able to offer you things that you need from every walk of life allows you to understand that listening and being present um, is probably the most important thing. Because I think if I look back at the people who have been mentors, I think sometimes I'm so surprised at the fact that they were my mentors, right? That it was
Mhm.
these momentary things that happened, that synchrodestiny, that energy, that they saw something in me and I saw something in them, that kind of, but being open to that, right?
Mhm.
um, Along the journey, I think is super important. And I know I sound super vague when I say that, but it definitely, that's in contrast to when we talk about mentorship in medicine, right? Get
Mhm.
somebody who wants to do this particular specialty and wants to do it this way, and so you seek that person and make sure, I could give you parameters like, if it's a female, you seek a female surgeon because they'll understand the family dynamics and this, that, and the other. And yes, and that's all well and good and ideal. But I think in my journey and in other journeys that I've talked, in other people I've spoken to, it's those surprise people that come out of left field. And you think to yourself, if I didn't stop and listen for a second, if I didn't have a cup of coffee with that person, if I didn't trip over that curb and they caught me there, and then we ended up in this conversation, my entire life trajectory would have been different.
Mhm.
So I think mentors, for lack of better terms, it's the people that have been sent to kind of, gauge your
Mhm.
journey, but you can't hear them and you can't see them unless you're open to it.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to look at it. What do you think also has helped you be more, and maybe this is me superimposing what I see, but
Hmm.
be more creative in your approach in this field, and maybe the words open-minded. Like what are some of the values or principles that maybe distinguish you from some of your colleagues or peers in the industry that have helped you take your path, and take maybe the path that's a little less traveled?
Right. Um, I think it's change. I think it's the ability to deal with change.
Mm,
And I think, when you talk, you'd asked a question about being the things that have been pivotal or forks in the road,
mhm,
and like little things. And I think those are more meaningful to me now as a parent. And one example would be, I was, we're moving from Jamaica, we're moving now from Toronto to Jamaica. I'm 6 years old.
mhm,
And I moved with my dad first, and my mom and my sister came a little bit later. And the school system is an English school system. The British system is a little bit tougher on kids in elementary.
mm,
And so, my dad was determined. He had been raised in Jamaica, but yeah, he's an engineer, but he was determined that I be with my peers of my age group, right? Because I was a little
mm,
bit behind. And so we had this summer where, before the start of first grade, where this guy was on me, right? He was like, we're doing tests every day. We're doing academics. I'm at the table crying. My mom is feeling sorry for me. And, they're like, why are you pushing her so hard? And I'm like, Dad, I can't take this anymore, right? And he is just every day, right? We're gonna do more problems. We're gonna do. And then I get into first grade. I'm very quiet. I'm learning this new. I mean, my parents speak with a Jamaican accent, but now the entire class, right? I'm learning lingo,
right.
and And again, new kid on the block, right? These kids have been together for the 2 years prior, and by the end of the year, I am number one in math, and I'm getting all this clout. And I remember, I remember thinking to myself, I said, I remember even at age 6 thinking, if I work really hard at something, if I work really hard at it, right, I can do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's I may have to take a different approach, right? The other kids probably didn't work all summer, and it was not easy, but I love this feeling, and I love the feeling of winning. So why not? And the
Hmm.
change was hard, but here I am. I'm able to deal with the change because I was able to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And so that kind of stuck with me, to this day. The ability to that we're all in evolution, and just because we start one way doesn't mean we have to finish that way. It might not
Yeah.
be where you're supposed to be.
When I think of my interactions with you, I think, yeah, for sure that competitive drive. I think your humor for sure. And you telling your story, it makes me think that I wonder if a little bit of your humor, because I've seen this in others or even in myself, where you create humor early in your life to cope with the change of schools and new relationships that you have to form. Like it's like a superpower if you can break the ice and break people down and get them to laugh.
Yes,
And so I could see maybe that being part of your journey as well.
absolutely, absolutely. Again, laughter is the best medicine, and you can always find a perspective to laugh about, in the worst. And I've learned that. I mean, I've learned that from patients, right?
Mm,
You deal with people who are in horrible situations, and again, as a young doc, majority of them are horrific, and then you meet that one patient who is in the most horrible situation, right? Who can look at it and knows they're going to die in a month, and still find humor and make you laugh and bring joy to everyone around them. And you're like, how do you do this, right?
mm,
They can find that sliver of humor, in all the disaster, and you learn from them. You learn
yeah.
from them.
That's a great example. Comedians have that ability to take, the really traumatic moment and very quickly turn it into a bit for comedy, right? And
Absolutely.
it's a special ability, and it makes, I think, life probably a little bit more enjoyable. But you definitely have that. That's, I think, unique to you. And then the third thing that I've noticed, I think, from your story, and then what you've chosen to do, because I'm sharing a little bit because of me seeing a little piece of your journey here in
Mm-hmm.
Houston is, your risk tolerance. And I know that there are plenty, I'm sure, plenty of medical practitioners that have some risk tolerance, but it's easy once you get into, and maybe I shouldn't say easy, but you get into a habit, you start your practice or you go into practice, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
rhythm to it, and you can
Mm-hmm.
sustain that rhythm for 20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Insurance to some degrees covers the lead generation for your practice. So you're really
Mm-hmm.
focused. And you've made a choice to step
Mm-hmm.
out of insurance-based medicine. And I mean, in the medical world, from my understanding, that is a very big risk to take
Mm-hmm.
because there's a whole new thing you have to learn to build a practice when it's not based on insurance-based
Right.
patients, right? So
Yes.
how did you get comfortable with risk like that?
Um. Ooh, that's hard, and I think it's multiple. I think it's multiple. That's very multifaceted. The
Mm,
risk. I think the risk was based on, the thought of losing what I love, which is medicine.
mm,
And I think medicine practiced in the way that I think it should be practiced. And remember, I said I started my journey with this little old lady who was Dr. Kent, who made me feel so special, right?
yeah.
And that's what I know was good medicine. And again, it's the risk to really preserve what you love, which is really taking care of the whole patient. And you cannot, based on the economics of medicine and the way insurance is going, and the value that they and the way they devalue physicians, for economic gain, the, you know, I cannot, the reality is the time that I can, in order to keep practices open, docs are seeing patients every 15 minutes. And you cannot do what I do. You cannot make a difference in somebody's trajectory in 15 minutes. You need time. You need time spent. You need to put that half of the diagnostics, half of what I do, half, more than half, is hearing and processing your story. And if I can't hear it, if I don't have the time, and I just got to a point where I can't sleep at night and I can't leave this planet half-assing this career the way it's going right now. And so it was the risk to preserve what I thought. I prefer to just, I'd prefer to take the dive and fail than continue to lose love for something that has been the center of my world for so many years. So that's where the drive came from, to make that switch. And then, again, life challenges. My greatest life challenge was my by by far was losing my sister. And I remember before she passed away, she said to me, she was like, she's like, what are you going to be afraid of? Why are you afraid? Right? What do you have to lose? You're here. If you're here, then do something with it. Right? Because tomorrow's not promised. I'm here to tell you that. And I was like, okay, I got my walk-in orders. Make it happen.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
it's what I'm hearing you saying this is like the risk. It's almost like a risk to what? There's a risk to doing the status quo because maybe again, easy is not the right word, but there's a pattern and it's set out before you, right? And it's been done 100 times. But there's also risk in doing that because you're not, in your mind, able to provide the right level of service to the patient. And so there's a risk in staying in the status quo. And
absolutely.
that's the risk of regret. And so you've kind of it as, hey, that I want to take the risk where I try and do it the right way and fail in the process because that's what makes life worth living. Yeah, I love that. I
Yep.
love that. I want just a little detour and then bring it a little bit back to your current practice. The detours that, we're in this middle of this election cycle, and every time you're in an election cycle, insurance and healthcare comes up as a main item. And I love having conversations with people on from all the different angles of, and I'm not going to put you in a weird political position, but I'm just curious, almost because you've had exposure between, the trip you took to Kenya to doing some of your study in the UK, to living in Canada and then in the US, you've had a more global perspective on medicine in real life than a lot of people who've been through our medical system here. What's your perspective on how things are run and what's out there and what's available?
Right. I mean, I think what's going to be the short answer is I think that we're going to have to come up with a bit of a hybrid system, because right now the way insurance is structured, it's for profit. Again, the bottom line is healthcare, which is life or death. And attaching economics to it is just always going to be dangerous. And right now we're in a situation where insurance is a great idea, but right now the cost of it in terms of what the patient has to pay and what they're getting out of it, adding in really high deductibles, it's almost unattainable in many ways. So I think that the long the economics don't make sense on the physician's side. Economics don't make sense on the patient side. On the insurance side, it makes sense, right? And
Yeah.
so I think, and it's ingenious, right? It's an insurance company, you pit the physician against the patient. And so let them battle it out, and they stand by and just collect from both sides, right? They collect on this side and then they don't pay the other side. I mean, it's ingenious, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
People poo-poo national, socialized healthcare, But the flip side of socialized healthcare is that your baby's appendectomy for acute appendicitis won't bankrupt you,
Hmm.
whereas in this country it may, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that to have a healthy population, these services need to be accessible, okay? But at the same time, it's being your ability and access is being controlled by a non-medical entity, right?
Yeah.
The insurance companies is telling us what we can and can't do. So it has to collapse before, and it has to be rebuilt.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting perspective. I grew up in Germany for 7, 8 years of my life. And so I had some, European upbringing in my early childhood.
Hmm.
And I often think about every culture is different, and that plays a little bit of role in how things operate. Germans are very follow the rule book, culturally
Hmm.
speaking,
Hmm.
overall. And so
Hmm.
certain things work really well for them that might not work over here as well.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I always wonder, that if we had a little bit more perspective on how other systems operated across the world, if we could find something maybe a little
There
bit
is
better.
there is definitely room for cross pollination, and that's where my frustration is when people are like, we can't go to a socialized system or we can't do this. But the problem is that then talk to me, get some clout, get some information, let's have a discussion, right?
Mhm.
And I just don't think there's enough cross pollination in terms of development of a sturdy healthcare. So because you need a healthy population. um, but again, part of that is you need to reward physicians for preventative care, right? We need to,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then as a population, we need to take responsibility in terms of, now that we have the information, how do we defer disease? How do we prevent things from happening? And if we start doing that, then the cost of healthcare will start going down, right?
Yeah.
And then we can make better decisions. But like, it's still like, it's a mess.
It is a mess. Yeah, it's the one thing we can all agree on is it's a
Right.
mess.
Right.
But yeah, yeah, we could have a glass of wine and talk about that for like 4 hours because
Oh,
there's a lot there.
absolutely.
But talk to me about going into a practice where it is a private pay model. Like, what's been terrifying and challenging about that? What's
Yeah.
been rewarding and freeing about that?
Hmm.
What's that path been like for you?
Ooh, again, that was a very hard coming. I was trained in socialized healthcare, right?
Yeah.
Access for all. So that was a very, very um, difficult position to be in. But watching the reimbursement go down in
Hmm.
terms of what the insurance companies are paying, I mean, docs are barely, and I need people to understand this. There was a time when I used to, look up to the docs ahead of me, and I will just say this, that I've had my 21st medical school reunion. So I've been in this game for a little while. Um, where these guys used to drive Ferraris. These guys used to do very well, or apparently did very well economically. Those days are very much over, right? In
Yeah.
surgeries that you think are people are getting tons of money, the docs aren't getting tons of money from it, right? So
Mhm.
so for me it was very, the decision, the business side was, I ended up doing a business course to get ready for the private practice, and had to really start to calculate how many patients would I have to see to cover my light bill, to cover my, and then you're
Mhm.
starting, I mean, I had to grieve, right? I had to
Mm.
grieve that I could not sustain an insurance-based model and provide the kind of care that I wanted to care. And I had to just take some time, meditate that away, pray about it, and be like, all right, look, this is not it. But the flip side of it is the deductibles were ridiculously high. Most patients are not even meeting them, so they're giving the money away anyway.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Right.
and then looking at where it is in terms of where we are for health maintenance, and understanding there's this group of patients that are really interested in their healthcare in terms of aging well, in terms of staying on the right side of disease,
Mhm.
um, i.e., away from disease. And so that population has started to grow. So it was a combination of all those factors that I could service people. And yes, there's socioeconomics involved, but as I've done it, it's been less and less. It's really about people who want to invest in themselves, right? They want the best possible care, and they know that I'm going to fight for them. And so, they bring their pennies to me, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that they're the best way they can be, right?
Yeah.
But that really had to manifest before I really started to believe that this was possible. So
Hmm.
the nice thing is though is that because it's small, like I know all my patients, and I get a chance to really spend time with them. I get to learn from them. Um, we do shoe shopping in the consult. We have a really, you know, my guys
Yeah.
and I were talking about football. I mean, we really have a wonderful, and I look at my schedule and I love coming to work every single day. Love, love, love.
That's awesome.
Um, the other aspect of things I believe in, I told you, I started this journey going on medical missions, and that's something I've continued to this day. Right now,
Mm.
we go to Guatemala every year to do free surgery. And, there was, the year before last, I couldn't go because I couldn't afford to go. And I was like, I'm not giving up this aspect of my life because an insurance company has decided this is the value I'm going to put on all that you do.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of pivotal for me in terms of like, right, I'm going to give this a go. Um, Worst that can happen is that it fails, but I have the most amazing patients, and they have also been a huge source of encouragement. So I just one day at a time. Here we are.
Yeah. And then this last piece of it is that I'm so fascinated in is that you're able to witness the cutting edge development of how technology has implications for cost and impact and health.
Hmm.
And you are kind of on some of the pioneering side of that, what I would
Right,
say more so, right?
right.
And that, what I heard from you and we were eating breakfast the other day is you were talking about the testosterone clinics. And
Hmm.
well, I think you could say 5% of the population might have known about testosterone as a form of treatment
Hmm.
for maybe 5 years to a decade, but like the vast
Hmm.
majority of people probably still don't really know what that means. So
No.
I thought for our listeners, it might be interesting for you to kind of describe this. Like, how did you arrive? You already shared a little bit of that from the women that you worked with. It flowed over to the men, but how did the conversation of testosterone and what did you learn about it that caused you to go, oh, we need clinics for this?
Well, okay. So let's take it back a second. I'm gonna just when the WHI came and we took every woman off hormones,
Hmm.
it was a huge dilemma because now, okay, well, what do we do now with these women going through menopause? And then, we were quick. One of the number one surgeries in America is hysterectomy with removal of ovaries, right? And we were doing those a dime a dozen, right? Probably the most
Wow.
common surgery that existed beyond C-section. And now they were like, oh my gosh, well, we can't give them hormone replacement. So now, what do we do? Do we leave the over? Well, the argument became leave the ovaries in because it continues to produce testosterone even after menopause. Oh, I said, no, I said, well, hold on a second. When did we start talking about testosterone in women, right?
Mm.
But this was the forgotten hormone. So we knew that this was part of their well-being in terms of going into the menopause transition, and we would cut that short by taking out the ovaries. Fast forward, and recognizing when I started getting into studying menopause medicine and hormone management, that again this is a source of our well-being, and testosterone is so important in terms of our transition and in terms of our state of well-being, and it all has all other health benefits of which we need a little bit and
Mhm.
y'all need a lot. All right.
Okay.
But flip side, we need a lot more estrogen, but my men still have estradiol and they need to have a little bit, right? You got to
Mm.
balance them out. Everybody is a yin and yang thing. And so flip to, these patients, these women are starting to do better in terms of their hormone management. And then their partner's like, hold on a second, you look better, you sound better, you feel better, where's my piece of the pie? And then really getting into understanding how testosterone works in men, almost very similarly to how it works in women.
Mm.
And again, we're very comfortable with menopause. We're very comfortable with the fact that there comes a time in a woman's life the ovaries just say, stop, we're done, right? We're comfortable
Yeah.
with that idea. We're getting better, right? Super comfortable with puberty, just getting comfortable with menopause, but we're comfortable with the idea that this stops. For men, it's a slow decline, right, over time. And again, when we talk about menopause replacement and we talk about states of well-being and hot flashes, and it's about their quality of life, right? In terms of this essential hormone to being female is necessary at certain levels for me to operate. Okay.
Mhm.
So flip it to the men. Now we're talking about understanding in that slow decline that your main hormone needs to be in certain levels for good quality of life, right? So getting away from this concept of testosterone and my penis, right? If my
Yeah.
penis works, then I don't need testosterone, right? That
Yeah.
is only part of it. Your testosterone receptors are where? They're in your muscle, right? They're in your brain. They're in your brain. They're in your brain.
Yeah.
They're right. They're in terms. They're in your skin. It's everywhere. It's what makes you a man, right? So
Mm.
we know that decline. So for men that are struggling with these certain symptomatology, brain fog, fatigue, you know, they are it's if their numbers come back below a certain threshold, they're just running out of messengers at a slower rate. When we it happens to us suddenly.
Yeah.
So understanding that it's this is in my mind, and then we talk about this is part of aging. Okay, I mean, there are a lot of things that are part of aging, right?
Yeah.
But understanding that if you can make a decision in terms of how that trajectory is, because we know that you're running out of messengers. The question is, do we give you more messengers so you function better?
Yeah. It's so interesting. I mean, I had a good friend who, married, had a little baby girl. He's in his 40s, and he told me, he's like, yeah, I've been doing testosterone treatment because I've just been so exhausted. And I never thought that was going to be the solution, but
Mm-hmm.
the doctor I was visiting with suggested I explore it, and we did an assessment, and
Mm-hmm.
my count was like horrendously low.
Right.
And so it's interesting, but yeah, so that kind of opened my eyes that like fatigue may or may not correlate, right? But it very well could.
Mm-hmm.
That fatigue, low energy, brain fog, and men can have a correlation with your testosterone levels, especially what are kind of the age markers for when that becomes more uh, symptomatic, I guess.
Well, I mean, most of the time we kind of focus on men in their 50s, right?
Okay,
But the reality is, the more aware people become,
of
that
that count. Yeah,
right, men are now more open in their 40s, even late 30s, to understanding if their testosterone is low, that they may not be functioning as optimally, right?
yeah,
The idea, I mean, yes, what's a little brain fog or fatigue, right? Go what? So why don't you stop in the middle of the day and go take a nap? Right? No, you cannot do that. You have to work. You have to
yeah,
provide. You have all these things to do, right? So therefore, how do you optimize your production, right? In my opinion, the most natural way possible, right? Because I can give you a bunch of things for brain fog, right? I can give you Ritalin. I can give you. I'm tricking your body. I can give you Ritalin. I can give you cocaine. I mean, there are all these things,
cookie.
right? Right? There are all these things, right?
True, sugar.
There are these things. It will give you energy, right? I'm not saying, let's just caveat, I'm not prescribing cocaine to anybody, and you should not take it, people.
Oh, I think you said a cookie. I think you said
No,
cookie. I was like, give me a cookie.
I could give you a cookie too. I'm gonna give you a cookie.
Uh,
A special cookie. No, I'm kidding. But no, I'm not prescribing cocaine. But there are a number of
yes,
drugs, right, legal and illegal, that you can take to
that cause.
mitigate your symptoms, right?
Yes.
The challenge I put before people is that if I give you a testosterone molecule, your
Hmm.
body knows exactly. I don't have to trick it.
Process it.
Your
Yeah.
body knows what to. There are receptors that have a big T on it, and your body goes, I know exactly what to do, right?
Mm.
And I'm not. You don't want super physiologic levels, right? I don't want you raging out of here like Hercules or the Hulk, right? You want a nice even amount, right? And it doesn't take big doses to make you feel better over a longer period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so it's very intriguing to we don't have like the whole time to really explore all the science behind it, but I
Hear
find
that?
you become more interested the older you get in the science behind these things.
Absolutely.
And in particular, you think of all the advancements we've made in the last 10 years of how things impact our energy and our health
Mm-hmm.
and then testosterone is kind of this period we're in. It's another solution to, like you said, aging and energy. And um, I think a good amount of my energy as a man right now is probably expended on my 2.5-year-old. I thought about this after our conversation. We have
Right.
an assessment in our company called the Culture Index. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
things this assessment measures in people
Mm-hmm.
is their behavior profile, but they also measure their energy units, is what they
Mm-hmm.
call it. And they have a pretty good way of defining like how big your gas tank is. And it's a variable thing that changes over the course of time.
Mm-hmm.
And they suggested that, like, hey, if you have little kids, your energy unit gas tank may have shrunk a little bit the way you take this
Right.
adjustment, right?
Yes.
But it made me think that how important energy is in our lives, or especially for business owners and entrepreneurs to be able to maintain, a rigorous workload and being a dad and balancing all these things. So it's
Well,
worth
well,
this.
you if you think about the number, you make more decisions between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. than
Mhm.
someone in 1901 would make in a week, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, we talk about, or I talk a lot about decision making capacity, right? The ability to, from the moment your alarm goes off in the morning, you're making decisions. Should I get up? Should I stay asleep? Should I get up? Should I go jog? It's this. So you are mentally, right, doing more than human beings have done ever. Okay. The other issue is that, you, like me, are a more mature parent.
Yes.
Um, right. I
You
mean,
you meant wise, right?
wise. That's right. Wiser parents. But like, we should really physiologically, anthropologically, we should be grandparents right now, right? We should
Wow.
be, right. Our kids, we should have had kids at 19, right?
Yeah.
And then we should be sitting back in our rocking chair taking care of some grandchildren. This is not how we've evolved. So the demands on us are actually much, much greater. And people need to recognize that this is not, we're not naturally built for this. So some level of positive supplementation is going to be necessary to do all the things that we do.
Yeah. Love that. I know we're coming up on time, but two quick questions that are maybe like more lightning roundish. One is, what are some of the books you've read here over the last like 6 to 8 months that you just think were really fascinating? Like these were something.
Um, I think my mantra is discipline equals freedom.
Okay.
So I think anything that you're disciplined out, you will then create. That's the only way to truly create freedom, right? Whether it's your exercise, whether it's your academics, whatever you do, it's whatever you put discipline to. So Atomic Habits has been by James Clear has been
Mm.
a game changer for me, just reinforcing that, especially going into this transition. Um, the one book that I've read 3 times is The Alchemist, which I absolutely adore, and I loved recently because he talks a lot of is Deepak Chopra's the spontaneous fulfillment of desire, which
Mm.
is talks a lot about synchrodestiny in terms of energy and energy between people and your frequency, and you know that life is really, there are no coincidences, that everything is on purpose and a result of what you put out there, and again, you can choose to take that in, but don't ignore and don't not celebrate even the littlest things that you think, that may quit. It is part of your journey, and it's how to keep things light and joyful. So that book was awesome for me. So those are the three.
Those are great. I mean, I haven't read the last one. Alchemist, I love. Atomic Habits, I love. Good. That's a good series of book recommendations, all very different, but great focus
Mhm.
points. One of the last things I'll share, then I'll ask my final question is you have, you a cross section of what we found make great minds work on this
Mhm.
podcast is
Mhm.
curiosity. And
Mm.
curiosity, you can hear it in your voice of what you've that's taken you down this path of research with women and men's health in a different light. It's
Mhm.
taking you to reading books, it's taken you to England to study.
Mhm.
Curiosity is something I hear a lot from you because you're always peeling back the layers of the onion to figure out the next thing. I mean, you
Mhm.
even, the way you and I met was you engaged in coaching at a time period when you were transitioning to private pay because you were curious
Mhm.
about how you could build a practice. And
Mhm.
I love that your curiosity has been also a big driving force, I think, in your career.
Thank you.
Um, Last thing would be this. What advice might you give to a 21-year-old that was just Terri Samuels, wasn't Dr. Terri? Well, I guess maybe you were a doctor by then.
I was.
We'll say like an 18-year. What advice would you give to
Right.
an 18 or 19-year-old Terri Samuels pre-doctor?
Um, I, uh, well, I'd remind her that your discipline thus far has given you the freedom to give options, right?
Mm,
I'd remind her that, again, everything is scalable, right? And everything is doable. So, you know, school is your job. It's a game. Find out how to play it, find out the rules, circumnavigate. There is no get
mm,
over those humps to get to what you want. And definitively, I would tell her, past the fear, because on the other side, it's everything that you want.
mm,
Because again, you're growing up, and the fear can be paralyzing.
mm.
And so, I would remind her, lady, just push past it. Just
Yeah.
push past it. Yeah, have the courage. Don't just do it. And don't be afraid of failure, because again, it's never really truly failure, right?
No.
What it truly is that nugget of information that you needed for the next thing. And I've watched that manifest over the years. So I've
Mm,
now, so I would remind her, being fearless, I think, is not what I mean, because you want to be able to sit in the fear. You want the adrenaline. You want the ability to kind of make those decisions, right? So you don't want to be fearless, but you want to be able to kind of step over it, like, all right, ooh, felt it, fine,
yeah.
let's go.
Yeah, and the relationship to failure, I just had this thought in my mind that, just in the world of medicine and organic chemistry and biology, I mean, failure is the pathway of human evolution to begin with, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
all breakage and failure as a learning mechanism for growth, and that's
right.
we're a product of that. So, what a good note to end on, Dr. Terri Samuels. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time and wisdom, and maybe we'll do a second parter here in the near future to hear more about the cutting edge medicine that you're practicing.
Oof.
We can learn from
Don't
it.
get me started. Don't get me started, Adam.
Really
Alrighty, hope
appreciate
you're
your
able to
time.